Brendan, do you have the next Hangout queued up? Okay, we're on air, everyone. Hey, welcome back. How was that break? Was that good? All right, let's go ahead and find our seats because we have our next group up. It's a panel presentation. Let me introduce you to Mr. Pete Forsyth. Take it away, Pete.
Thanks, Rosie, and thank you for your efforts and for the whole team, Britta and Rosie and Stephen. It's been a great team to come together to put this event together. So my name is Pete Forsyth. I actually am really delighted to have both Wikipedia's 15th birthday and also my 10th anniversary of editing Wikipedia happening in the same month. And one of the things that always really going back pretty much to the beginning of my efforts with Wikipedia is that I've always been really interested in how people can get involved, how people can, people and organizations can contribute to the idea of Wikipedia, which really I think is a very universal idea, without necessarily becoming, the daily obsessive Wikipedians that many of us, find ourselves inclined to be. And so what that's led to is in 2009, I started a company called Wiki Strategies. And what we do is we help organizations engage ethically and effectively with Wikipedia. So if a company wants to work on their own Wikipedia article and they want to contribute to what Wikipedia is, they don't want to break the rules, they want to be clear about who they are, there's still a lot of help that they need to be able to do that. So I'll advise them on that. I've also had the pleasure of working with foundations and nonprofit organizations to improve general topic areas of Wikipedia as part of their mission fulfillment. So all of that to say that the panelists that I chose today are people with a variety of perspectives on Wikipedia. A couple of them do have a deep background with Wikipedia, as you'll find out, but not so much as daily editors, but with sort of a more unique perspective. And then we also have I have a journalist who's going to join us. It's actually not the journalist who's listed on the page and whose video you might have seen ahead of time. That was Kathryn Cheney, and she unfortunately isn't able to be here with us today. But Jenny Manrique is going to stand in her place, who's also a journalist from Colombia. And then we also have a social justice advocate, Uncle Bobby, who, if you've been in the Bay Area for a little while, you surely know who Oscar Grant was. He was killed on a BART platform on New Year's Day in 2009. It's been just a tremendously impactful event in Oakland, and I think in bringing together the Black community and the social justice community in the East Bay. And Uncle Bobby has been a major figure in helping manage the human side of that, and in helping families relate to each other and different stakeholder groups relate to each other. And I feel that there's a strong similarity between the kind of work that he does and what we do with Wikipedia. So we'll get to talk with him about that. So why don't you all come up? So I guess let me do those introductions a little more formally, because I only gave you 2 of the 4 names. So starting all the way to my right is Kathy Casserly. Kathy Casserly is, she was the CEO of Creative Commons when I first met her, or I think was maybe just before you became CEO. So Creative Commons is, for anyone who doesn't know, they are another nonprofit organization that makes the copyright licenses that makes things like Wikipedia possible. They make it easy for people to say in a legal and clear way, I want you to reuse my work. I want you to build on it. I want you to republish it. And so she's, and her background is also very deeply involved with open educational resources, which is applying those principles in education so that you don't have teachers everywhere reinventing the wheel every single time they make a lesson plan, so that they can build on each other's work and adapt it. To Kathy's left, we have Jenny Manrique, having trouble rolling those R's today for some reason. And so Jenny was kind enough to step in when we found out that Kathryn wasn't able to join us. And Jenny is a journalist originally from Colombia, and who's been in the Bay Area for, I think, a year and a half. Then we have Uncle Bobby, Cephas Johnson, who I just gave you the intro there. So we'll be hearing a lot from him about social justice and the resonance that he sees with Wikipedia. And finally, we have Eugene Eric Kim, who is maybe the most familiar face here to some of you. Eugene is a longtime member of the Wiki community from actually, I think, before Wikipedia even existed, or at least the early days. So Wiki software being the idea that Wikipedia ended up basing itself on, of making it very easy for anyone to change a page on the internet, which seems kind of normal now that we have, you know, Facebook and YouTube and all these different opportunities to change what's on the web. But, you know, back in '96 when Wiki software was invented, it was a pretty novel idea. So that's, I think, some of the background that Eugene brings, and what I think the most significant thing he did in the Wikipedia space is he led a process in 2009, 2010 to generate a strategic plan, for a 5-year strategic plan for the Wikimedia movement. And it was a really in-depth process. It took a year. It involved over 1,000 people. So this is really different from how most organizations develop a strategic plan, which is usually to take their board or a very small group and you know, lock themselves in a room for a month and develop something and then present it to their staff or their community. So we'll get to hear a bit about that process as well, and what it might look like now in 2015, now that 5-year plan has essentially gone full circle. So with all of that, I would like to start in the middle here. Uncle Bobby, we had so I have videos with 3 of the 4 on YouTube. So we had an interview, and you told me a bit about your background and about Wikipedia. But where would you like to pick up today? What would you like to dig into a little deeper?
Okay, again, hello everyone. And Pete, thank you for definitely inviting me to sit here and share from the social justice perspective of a family member being affected, and then going into Wikipedia to see what it says. You know, initially, I didn't think I could contribute anything, because like many of families like myself, when we read Wikipedia, we see these biases that are portrayed in the story that affects our reality. And so there becomes a disconnect. But I'm here today to bring what I hope a vision to what can help, I believe, the authors or those that put stories in Wikipedia to think about their biases that they may put in the story as they share, or the language that they use that are reflective of hurting someone when it comes to them reading it, affecting our realities. I hope I'm making myself clear. So I thought about what I can share to help. When I read the Oscar Grant story that's in Wikipedia, it was like he was murdered a 3rd time. He was murdered on a Fruitvale BART station. He was murdered by what we call reporters or mass media. And then the aftermath, those that decide to write about this story, again uses languages that appears to put Oscar in a real negative state. And for us, when we read this, it becomes extremely painful. So the first thing that I decided to do was to take a look at who are these people that are part of this community of Wikipedia and writing these stories. And so the little bit that I do know is predominantly white males, some women, of course. I didn't really get any inference of a Black community that are Wikipedians. So the story then becomes more told from a white perspective that is actually creating the divide that we're trying to resolve in our community. So it becomes extremely important for us that are Wikipedians, and I'm saying us because I'm gonna become one, in really telling the story as accurately as possible. Thank you. Because that's where the change come from. There's no need for me to run and not step up and do something to help make it better. And so that's my hope.
All right, thanks. So, Jenny, maybe we can hear some perspective from you. I mean, so and please take a moment to introduce yourself a little more thoroughly. We just met about an hour ago, so I did my best, but I don't want to get anything wrong. I'm a Wikipedian, right? So, so let's have a little original research. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the kind of journalism you're done, and then maybe a little bit about your perspective on a story like Uncle Bobby's.
Sure, there is not a Wikipedia page about me anyway, so you won't find much regarding that platform about me. But in general, at large, my work has been mostly in Colombia and other countries in Latin America. I have covered conflict for 10 years now. And then I moved here and just cover immigrant communities at large for different media here in the Bay Area, New American Media, Mission Local. Have written for the Los Angeles Times, America's Quarterly, and as a freelance, you just happen to be in many publications. That doesn't mean that you publish regularly in all of them. But well, that's the lack of being freelance. And I write about social justice issues a lot and immigration issues. And I also want to clarify that my experience of the kind of journalism that I do is not, you know, like the new era journalism or being fast and just, you know, upload information 24/7 in a website where you go and have the news right away it happens. So in that sense, also my experience reporting and the gathering information has more time, more analysis in a way. So I just, my way of reporting rely a lot in sources and how credible the sources are against like what the fastness of our current days, you know, sometimes demand. So I'm going to speak in a way from this kind of journalism that we actually can, you know, like dig a little bit more. In that sense, Wikipedia is another source. It's just another source. It's just you end up there doing a Google search. All of you know, obviously. And as a journalist, you just really take a very deep look on who are the sources quoted there, who is writing that, who are they referring to, and you probably will take more serious certain content that is really back up in, you know, journals or essays or things, you know, like what we call reliable sources or authoritative sources on certain matter. So listening to your experience is very interesting for me. To see how much some of the issues that are in the national media debate, and then you go to see what people from different perspectives do from that, or the kind of conclusion they can get from what they actually see in national media, and can come up in a web page, even with really good intentions of, you know, add something to the story. So I think, like, as a general rule for journalists, is you need to do a lot of fact checking on everything that is there. Editors are really, if you're working in a long term with certain editors that are really, you know, delicate in the terms of how you use certain sources, obviously you don't quote Wikipedia in an article, because Wikipedia is not actually the owner of the information, but the people who is feeding Wikipedia. So that's something that is not acceptable within newsrooms. And on the other hand, is you need to be very aware of who is building a profile of someone in these pages. So you know that there is a lot of not interested parties, but also there are people building politicians' profiles of, you know, the aides are there, or the staffers are there, or the family is there. So I think that for us, it's a challenge to find all this information so available for us and avoid the temptation of immediately quoted as a fact. So I think that's one of the rules of our job.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So Kathy, I think, you know, just to tie this really briefly in with the previous session that Britta put together, you know, Kathy, when we were talking on the side here, you had a really different kind of early experience with Wikipedia, didn't you? Can you recap that a little?
I was just commenting to Pete. So 2001 to 2009, I was at the Hewlett Foundation, and that's when we seeded the field of open educational resources, which has now grown into a movement. And we relied on the stories of Wikipedia and the governance and many of the lessons learned during that period. But during that period, I also wanted to fund Wikipedia. And so, I had talked to Jimmy Wales. He had come by the foundation a few times. There was a one half-time paid employee who lived in Florida. His name was Terry Foote, and we were in touch on a regular basis. He actually came to one of the very early OER conferences. And so I was, you didn't have the funding model you now have. It was more of a struggle in the early days, and they were trying to figure that out. So I had set aside money in my grant portfolio for Wikipedia. And I did it for, 2-3 years. This must have been 2002 to 2005. And of course, Terry was incredibly busy trying to help get this off the ground in the way it was. And obviously it was going to be an open process. The proposal, what was the community going to ask Wikipedia for funding? And so he, told me it's going to be an open process. I'm like, fine, whatever you need to do, but I do need a proposal because I need to obviously support the documentation of how the funds are used. So that story is really my very first experience in some ways with Wikipedia.
And I think it's so indicative of one of the kinds of trends that we see so often in the wiki world of like there's this genuine and really exciting and worthwhile process where you want to kind of throw something open to everyone adding their ideas. But that kind of process and the way that an organization thinks in terms of deadlines and documents and being concise and being focused on the stuff that's going to have the greatest benefit and everything are just two different worlds. And I feel like that's something that we really struggle with. Just if I could just speak for myself for a second, I feel like one of my biggest hopes for Wikipedia is that it could become one of the best examples of how like a grassroots driven world can connect with more formal structured institutions. And I think we probably have a ways to go there. Like we maybe made a little progress, but we probably got a ways to go there too. But I wanted to sort of come off of that to this issue because you were also, what you were trying to fund is education, right? You were trying to fund changing and increasing the openness of and the collaboration in education. And that kind of open collaboration, that's what we're hearing about from Uncle Bobby, from all of the people who presented earlier today. So why is that? How does that connect with the world of education, and what would you like to see happening in education?
If we think back kind of in many ways to the traditional norms of education, and historically education has been initially to the privileged few. It was those who were in the monasteries. It was those in the one-room schoolhouse. It was those who had parents who were educated, who were taught to read and who were literate. Also in many places of the world, this is still true. But then there became public education, and particularly in this country, there's public education. And yet we don't use the resources effectively. We initially teachers, when we think about the K-12 system, they create these great lesson plans, but they work in their box because the educational system is set up like Taylorism and industrialization. We move students from box to box. So there's another whole conversation about the disruption of education. But the teachers have those lesson plans in their file box. That was the original. And they didn't have a way to easily share them with other teachers. And then then they began to put them in, but they were on their desktop, and there wasn't an easy way to share them per se. But there are ways that this great content that teachers are creating doesn't need to be created again and again. And so in our very early days of thinking about open educational resources, about thinking about leveling the playing field, about equalizing access for all, we wanted to make sure that funds could be used much more efficiently and that there could be continuous improvement around the educational materials that are created, so we create efficiencies. And there's a difference with Wikipedia, where we're not saying there is only one canonical way to teach a lesson plan in algebra, but we don't need every teacher who teaches algebra to create their own lesson plan. And if they have and rely on textbooks, they could be openly licensed textbooks that we could easily share. And if you want a print version, pay $5 instead of the prices that we all know. So these are some of the lessons, and these are some of the visions that we had in the early days.
And which is so fascinating to me, because my first experience of the idea of open educational resources, which was much later, but my thought And the people I was talking to in the early days, this is actually when I came to originally to work for the Wikimedia Foundation. What brought me to the Bay Area was to develop a program where students are doing Wikipedia-like stuff. So even it's like each of us comes from our own direction, and we kind of have a different kind of focus. But it's like the kind of collaboration that you see on Wikipedia, where it's possible to see what other people are doing, comment on it, criticize, question. That kind of behavior, I think, is really important to society. It's something that the way the internet has grown has really allowed us to do at a much bigger scale in the last 10 years or so. And it's funny because we all think about Wikipedians. I was thinking about students. You were thinking about teachers. It all, journalists. It all starts to come together. And I think that's going to be a good lead-in to, I think, to Eugene's perspective. Before I get to that, I just want to say, so this will be my fourth sort of intro here. And so now that you're getting to know all these people, instead of just like talking and then having a separate Q&A session, I think we have a mic. Maybe we have one of the microphones up here. Do we still have a microphone over here? I'd just like to invite anyone who has a comment or a question, just if you stand over here, I'll see you and I'll just bring you into the conversation as we go. So at about the same time as I did, I worked here at the Wikimedia Foundation for about 1.5 years, and also during that time, Eugene was running this strategic planning session, and I wonder, like based on just the things that we've been talking about here so far, like how do you get from those, from Uncle Bobby caring about his nephew and how his story is told, to a journalist who's interested in like the ethics of telling a story the right way and like what sources are, and considerations about education. How can something like strategic planning fit in with that? What's the point, and what can we hope to achieve through doing stuff like that?
Thank you for giving me the softball question to open for my opening remarks here. So I think one of the things that's amazing to me about the Wikimedia community, across all of the different projects, and I think we really saw this today in terms of all the talks that happened beforehand. People come here for their own weird, obscure reasons, right? I mean, Britta's talk like really encapsulated that, and so everybody is passionate about something in the world. And Wikipedia offers this space for people who are weirdly passionate about whatever they care about to come in and to share that knowledge, and to suddenly discover that what I care about that seemed weird to me, there are actually all of these other weird people who care about it too. And suddenly you've created this amazing resource that's one of the top 5 websites in the world, and that has like opened up all this opportunity. But at the end of the day, my interaction with it is like, I care about something that's weird and wonderful, and that's my interaction, right? So I think, like, that's really cool. And that resonates with me because like, I'm weird, and I like that stuff. But then the other amazing thing about Wikipedia, and I think this is where we start looping in everything else here, is that Wikipedia has had this vision for a very long time around what would the world look like if knowledge were freely available to every single individual in the world, right? What would that mean? And so underlying what people care about when they come in and when they're sharing knowledge about something that they're deeply passionate but might sound obscure and strange, is this value around making the world a better place. And so when I was sitting here and I was listening to what you said, Uncle Bobby, and when I was sitting and listening to Jenny and Kathy, your passion around education and all of these things, like clearly the world has a long way to go, right? There are all of these issues that we need to learn how to be better at. And some of these things are so fundamental in terms of like how we interact with other people, how we incorporate other voices, what the impact of that means in terms of our policies. The values around Wikipedia are so amazing. What's been accomplished are so amazing. It starts with this like free access and all of that, but that's actually not enough, right? If we truly care about shifting the world and making the difference that we say we want to make, we have to think about like how we can do this better, right? And I think some of these things like we're starting to understand, right? And I think we're starting to see, like, I thought the talk that you guys gave about the Wiki Women's Project, that was amazing, right? And all of you are longtime Wikipedians. And you're coming in and you're seeing this systemic bias and you're naming it and you're organizing it and you're making a difference, right? That's an example of saying, here's something that we care about. Here's a way, we've been here before. We've been just like editing and doing like the things that we find weirdly wonderful. But actually we care about this bigger problem and we understand what the impact is. And if we actually focus our efforts in a way that's more strategic, right, we can make a bigger impact in the world. And so I think that's ultimately what strategy is. It's saying, if we care about this larger vision, if we're completely aligned around this, if we're saying, how can we make the difference in all of these different worlds that we're talking about, what can I do differently? What can I do better? How can I actually change a world and make it the way I want to make it?
And I think that sort of core way of thinking about it is something that it's the idea of it when you started that process was familiar to me in a very deep way through my Wikipedia experience, because like when I started editing Wikipedia, you know, I started off because it was 2006 and I was just getting interested in local politics, and I had moved to Oregon years before, but I didn't know a lot about local politics, local history. And I was really just trying to do something about that. And there was an election. I was starting to care about the state legislature. I wanted to know who was running in all the local primary races. At that point, I really couldn't find a lot of that stuff on the web. I went to the Democratic Party's website. I went to the Republican Party's website, and you'd find little bits and pieces of information, but there was a lot of stuff. There were facts. There were people who were running, but it wasn't consistently reported. So I started a page, and unlike a lot of people, I assumed that I was doing something wrong. I assumed that sooner or later someone was going to come along and say, go away, you're doing it all wrong, this doesn't belong on Wikipedia. And I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll try something else, or maybe I'll, go on to some other website. I didn't have a lot invested. But what I found out was instead people kept, like, I would go away, I'd come back a week or two later, and people had added stuff to the page that I'd started. And so as that kind of evolved, I started to meet other people through Wikipedia that it was like a year or two before I ever met in person, but that who cared about the same stuff as me. And we started thinking about, like, okay, so we've got this nice biography of this one local legislator, but shouldn't we really have at least minimal information about every legislator in Oregon? Like, why should we focus on this one? So, that nature of trying to think a little bit bigger and, make plans around not just working on the one thing that's right in front of you, but the stuff that's like it. I think it's a natural part in a certain way of the Wikipedia ecosystem, but it's like thinking just a little bit bigger and thinking a whole lot bigger are really two different things. And I think it's a hard thing for Wikipedians to do, to like kind of make that jump. So wow, I didn't really plan on doing a whole monologue here. So why don't you help me out here?
A comment for the panel. I'm really grateful to be here. Congratulations, 15 years Wikipedia. So I see domain expertise on the stage, but there's one piece of domain expertise that I see missing, and that is that we live on a physical Earth. The physical Earth is it turns out, maybe a little more fragile than we know, because of the impact of man and mankind's actions on the whole system. And then you can go further, Gaia, whatnot, right of other creatures to live besides human beings. So I just want to throw out to the panel, it's a big topic. Too much information is a problem Wikipedians love to have, right? So here's another one, and that is the physical Earth and the expression of information about the physical Earth through Wikipedia as a resource.
Is there just before you go, is there a particular like article or sort of like instance of that comes to mind to you? Is there a way that you feel like Wikipedia fails to capture an area of knowledge or?
Come bearing gifts. So I can genuinely say that I'm every day more impressed by resources for maps and mapping that come through mainly the Germans, but others. I read a little bit of German, I read a little bit of the Russian with the translate tool, and I read English. So that's where I live. And there's just remarkable resources in collaboration with OpenStreetMap, another global phenomenon. I don't know, the organization that I represent, which is osgo.org, which is software for maps, mapping, and spatial data. It would be our, humble privilege to help out and collaborate. Honestly, it's been a little difficult to collaborate. We're probably grumpy, isolated thinkers, and there's probably some grumpy, isolated
I think
thinkers in those.
that difficulty in collaboration is something so many people have, and really something we've got to, find a way to, like, if Wikipedia is going to do better, we got to make it easier for people to.
5 years ago at the 10th anniversary, I approached some board members about some collaboration. A few things happened, many more didn't. I want to give special thanks to the work that Eugene has been doing and his lineage for bringing community together. And I look forward to more in the future.
Thank you. I wonder if maybe we could just go down, like, with just a quick answer, if you can do it. If you can think about, what was the first moment that you got excited about Wikipedia, or even just excited about online anything, that something new was happening online, that wouldn't have been possible without the internet?
I mean, I'll just go a comment. One of our first projects that we funded that projects that I remember back in 2012, I think, CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, started this idea of having a webpage about the journalists that were assassinated in Mexico, which I participated in. That actually has been the only time that I've been editing something in Wikipedia. And the great thing in the sense of how people is involved in the content, not because of the content itself, but it's like just by itself, it's been updated to last December, right? So at some point, the journalists we were working on just have us.
I'm sorry, I just want to break in. Just so I don't know if we're all familiar. Is this like a specific trend of journalists being assassinated in Mexico, or is it?
Since the start of the war against narco, which is kind of dated in 2010 with Felipe Calderon government. So I think there was a lot of misinformation around about what was happening. And, when you as a journalist kind of are defending freedom of expression, and so outside your community, people kind of don't understand if it's true or it's just, I understand that journalists are not the most lovable person everywhere. And, I myself can defend the entire, industry, because, I understand why people can't not trusting much of the work we do. But in Mexicans or some other countries where you do this sensitive work of covering certain conflicts. So there was a need of having a source, or at least a page where we say, they are killing journalists, these are name, last name, day, possible responsibles. And that's what the page is nowadays called, a list of journalists killed by narcos. And that was something, that project that I started again with the Center Committee to Protect Journalists. And now I just seen that it's updated by itself for people that is interested, probably other journalists, probably other citizens, but it's updated. I think that's a really nice result of collaborative projects.
Well, Uncle Bobby, we talked about lists as well, and I think you might have a bit of a different take on the kind of lists. You weren't able to find lists of that nature when we last talked.
You know, lists. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by lists.
Well, when we first talked, you were talking about the many
right.
black men that were killed by police,
Right.
that weren't covered in any way in Wikipedia.
Right. So that y'all can be clear, I go around the country speaking to inspire, but also to inform and to bring to reality the realities of what's happening in this world today, so that it can hopefully place within you a spark to bring real change. You know, and since this is Martin Luther King's weekend, he talked, as you know, about the beloved community. How do we all live in a community in a beloved way? And he said, justice is love, or love is justice. And so when we share, I should say it this way, speaking to you, those that share stories in Wikipedia, it becomes a question on why is it not the best documentation in the world that will reveal the heinous act of police murders in this country. Wikipedia has over 27 million subscribers that actually, I may be wrong, but if I'm reading it right, that put information within Wikipedia. And yet, we have no documentation that actually reports or keep accurately the amount of murders that take place within this country when it comes to young black and brown men and marginalized people. And so, as I research Wikipedia, one of the first things I do when I hear about a shooting is I see what it says on Wikipedia. And then, of course, I go and begin to do my own research. There are some cases that are chosen, and there are many that are not. So what I'm bringing you, those that are Wikipedians, how important it is that we keep our biases out of the story, or our biases in being inlaid in informing the world about this particular person, so that the family don't incur harm and create a greater divide within the community because of what you wrote down. Because the whole idea behind what's happening today is trying to bring the community together, to bring real change. But in many ways, unconsciously and some consciously, because I heard a story about it could have been a conscious move about a young man, I guess it was the biggest story Wikipedia had, that said he was part of the Kennedy assassination. I don't know.
John Siegenthaler. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So and just to tie this in, the reason this came up is Kathryn Cheney, who was going to be on this panel. If you look at her video, her story was that the first time she heard about Wikipedia, she was a high school student, and she was in a fellowship program in Washington, D.C. for young journalists, and the person who was presenting to them was John Siegenthaler, and he told them about how Wikipedia was this thing that they maybe should be a bit skeptical of. She didn't remember him as being, strongly anti-Wikipedia, but he definitely was speaking from deep personal experience of having basically a lie published on Wikipedia about himself for a couple of years. It's one of the main issues of Wikipedia.
Exactly, and that's the story that I'm saying. When Oscar's story was shared in Wikipedia, it inflicted major pain and even created anger, and then created a divide, because I said, there we go again, white supremacy. So we have to look at the essence of when we tell these stories, how we're telling them and from what perspective are we telling them. When I talk about, we talked about collaboration, Not all of us is going to agree on the best method to bring in a beloved community into existence, but we all must learn to work together and maintain our ideologies in making that happen, but not tearing down something because it's not the same as mine or the same as your belief. So it's my hope, as I end this, right, that I create within you those that are always on Wikipedia, whether you're, fact checking or however the process go, which I will be learning soon. Consider doing the right thing and making sure it's right. And the ultimate goal is, again, to create a beloved community where no one feels they've been slighted or inflicted or wrongfully disrespected.
That's I mean, Eugene, I don't know what you were planning to talk about, but I do think that's potentially a really great jumping off point, because I feel like that's something you were really trying to do in that process.
In the strategy process?
Yeah.
What exactly were we trying to do in the strategy?
Well, as far as instilling respect and a sense of wanting to do the right thing and using that to feed into how are we going to think about the bigger picture.
Got it.
But if I'm going to really give you your choice. What I asked originally is, when's the first time that you were excited or inspired by something you saw in Wikipedia or online collaboration? So start with either one.
Well, let me try and combine those two questions. Kathy, you said something interesting when you were talking about trends and what you think are different and what needs to happen. And you said collaboration can be really slow. And so the reason I'm in this business in the first place, the reason I first got interested in wikis, and basically what my career path and my life passion has been for the past, I don't want to count actually, for a long time now, is centered around collaboration. And I want to propose a slight amendment to what you said about collaboration being slow. Collaboration is only slow when we don't trust each other. When you have trust, Uncle Bobby, you were talking about love in communities, and I think love is tied with trust. When we have love, we develop trust with each other. When you have trust, you have speed, you have efficiency, you have opportunity, right? And so when we talk about high performance collaboration, when we talk about what is possible and why we want to be good at collaboration in the first place, the optimal way to do that is to have trust in your group. Trust is hard. I think developing trust, like that is a slow process. That's something that you have to invest in. You have to take time. You have to do all these things. And so in terms of like my origin story, in terms of Wikipedia and where I see sort of the opportunity and the impact and how this ties with what the other panelists have said, as you pointed out, Pete, my first exposure to this world was actually wikis, not Wikipedia. This was in the early 2000s. And the remarkable thing about Wikipedia was scale. And so please don't hate me. I'm going to tell you my Wikipedia origin story. In the early 2000s, I was editing Wikipedia anonymously. And my first edits to Wikipedia were vandalism, right? I was vandalizing Wikipedia. And I was doing it live.
You got to go.
And the reason I was vandalizing Wikipedia was that people were just, like, people saw it as a resource, and it was already starting to become an amazing resource, like almost right off the bat. And people were wondering how it worked, and no one realized that there were just a bunch of passionate people underlying Wikipedia, and some bots too, which were pretty important. And one of the things I wanted to demonstrate in terms of Wikipedia and how quickly it worked was that I could be sitting in front of a group like this, and we could edit the article live, and we could make the change, and we could talk for a minute or two, and then we could reload the page, and we could see that that page was fixed, right? And so that was what I was doing with Wikipedia. I wasn't sitting down and writing articles. I was going and I was giving talks about collaboration and opportunities, and I was editing Wikipedia and I was vandalizing it, and then
and undercutting trust.
And I was I was showing how not to build trust in a community. But in fact, what it was demonstrating was the resilience of a community that is actually built on trust. Because Wikipedia inherently is a system that says, I trust you. Any kind of system where it says, come edit me. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing, but you can click on this button and you can make a change. And my guess is like 80 to 90 to 95% of the time, depending on how cynical you are about humanity, you're actually going to make a contribution that's going to make us better. And if you're part of the 1% or 5% or 10% that is actively trying to hurt me, all the other people are stronger than you, and we're going to fix that. Right? That's the basis of Wikipedia, and that's why Wikipedia is so amazing, right? That being said, so we have this accessibility right now, and our ability to connect with people and to just change information that's like unprecedented in society. And I have always been struck, like in my business, when I'm working with groups, one of my early experiences around collaboration would be coming into an organization and them saying, we have a knowledge problem. We're trying to work more effectively with each other. We're not sharing stuff with each other. Is there a tool that we could use that might help us access some of our knowledge better? You know, is there something we could do? And one of the things I would often see is like we'd be sitting in a group, and maybe I'd be working with a group of like 10 to 15 people, and they'd start raising like, these are the kinds of things that we're trying to understand. And people would start talking about things they want to know. And I'd see someone in the group start to squirm in the chair. And they were squirming because they knew the answer to the question that one person was raising in the group. These were people who were working in the same space, side by side, who presumably had a relationship of trust between them, and yet weren't sharing the information, right? And so I think about what you were saying, Uncle Bobby, about like the makeup of Wikipedia editors right now. The fact that we know the majority of them are white men, primarily in Europe and North America still. College educated, right, tech focused. We have this resource that anyone can click, and yet not everybody is clicking it, right? And I think there's just something so fundamental in human nature. I mean, you know, we're sitting in a room of, I'm sure everyone here has incredible knowledge. How much are we going and tapping into each other's knowledge? How much are we finding about what we need? Like just the opportunity in this room alone, I think is really incredible. And so I think that next step is understanding that access is not enough, right? The value of openness is not enough. We have to understand that structural and cultural bias actually prevents us from making progress on all of these issues. And we have to understand how we can start overcoming them. And if we can learn how to overcome those at scale, we're going to start seeing massive shifts. The good news is that I think that knowledge is already out there, right? I think there are people out there in the world who are bridging divide, who are communicating with other people, who are understanding, like at a micro level, what inclusiveness means. That it's not just about like, oh, it's an open system, you can come in and change it, but reaching out to people, building trust, like creating opportunity, overcoming structural bias. So I think the answers are there, but we need to start incorporating that in our work.
Excellent. All right. Well, I can see so many jumping off points in all of these answers. You know, one thing that really comes to me from Uncle Bobby's most recent answer here is about that idea of trying to build trust and compassion in a community. And you know, I'm not going to ask that question right here because I think we're running out of time, and I see questioners. But I do want to point out there are videos of 3 of the 4 here, and Jenny, I hope you'll do one with me afterwards. It'll be on YouTube, so you'll find links to those on the event page. So we have dug into some of these issues a little more, and also, you know, I really hope that this panel creates some opportunities for discussion both here as we move to the cake and pizza mode. You know, like hopefully you can come up and talk to people if we don't have time for your questions, and also online. So we've got Twitter handles and Wikipedia user pages on the program. So please, you know, if you have questions, ideas, thoughts, let's carry it forward. Let's keep thinking about these things. But for now, let's go to our next questioner up here.
Hello. My question is. So my question is about in terms of like the future of Wikipedia and where you guys see it going more in terms of, you guys were talking about you know, the openness and the freedom of information and not trying to redo something that's already been done. So I mean, there's a lot of information that's already there in terms of news articles and in terms of, let's say, Khan Academy videos. So how do you, where do you see the future of Wikipedia going in terms of incorporating maybe a lot of resources that are already there into something that Wikipedia can use, or if that's possible, or what your thoughts are on those ideas?
Yeah, I'll just jump in quick. I mean, that was one of the things I commented to Pete on the video, was that the article is the construct around which the conversation happens, the tension is ironed out, people come to an agreement, you cite sources. And I think the world has changed from 15 years ago, so now we're consuming a lot of video, obviously, and there's a lot of other assets that could be part of the Wikipedia page, but that's shifts things in different ways. And I don't know, what the community thinks about that or how it might be combined, but I think the world has shifted. Video consumption is how we get a lot of our content now. And so for me, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it'll be something that Wikipedia will have to grapple with.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to respond briefly to that because it's an idea that comes up from time to time. It is possible to put video on Wikipedia pages, and it is, there are some great examples of it out there, but it is very, very rare. I think Andrew Lee at the last panel I did said it was something like, I think it was less than 1 in 1,000. I think it was like 1 in 10,000 articles has video on it. So there are technical reasons for that, but I think that the important thing to keep in mind, so that we don't sort of lose touch with the thing that has allowed us to be as successful as we are with Wikipedia, is that text, as boring as it might be, is fundamentally really predisposed to collaboration. If I see a sentence and it's got a grammatical problem in it, or if it's written wrong, and I want to fix it in text, all I got to do is click on it and change a letter and hit save. Boom, I can be done in seconds. Like if I know what I'm doing, it's like seconds. And with video, if a whole video was recorded and you realize that you got a fact wrong in the 5th minute, well, now you got to know about video editing. You got to have software. You got to be willing to take the time to download it and find the right spot and weave it in. And now maybe you have a different voice than the person who wrote it, so now it sounds discontinuous. So a lot of those problems, they're not just technology. Like they're real problems about the difference between text and video that we'll have to wrestle with.
Just a quick add-on to that is also in terms of articles and Khan Academy videos and all this other such, is introducing the idea of companies or other entities, instead of having specific individual users edit articles, because then if you're bring in BBC News or Fox News, and they have very conflicting views. So how would that maybe affect the future of Wikipedia? Like if that's something that you think is a future possibility.
I'm not sure I caught what the piece of it that is the future possibility.
Like in terms of if like not trying to redo stuff that's already been like try not to reinvent what was already there.
I understand the question.
You have articles that have already been written.
Yeah, so like basically if someone wrote something and then we want to reuse it, or we want to heavily base things on that, but it turns out that there was bias in that because it came from it, then
yeah, instead of having users trying to create something maybe unbiased or maybe biased, you have instead of users, you have entities that are creating content on Wikipedia.
Bias can definitely come from individuals, from organizations. So I see there's a couple other people with questions. If there's anyone who really wants to answer that question, go ahead and do it. But otherwise, I think let's move on to the next commenter. It is an important point, and I'm glad you brought it up.
So just want to comment on text and the dark side of obsessiveness. Most people who have been around Wikipedia know that it's a pretty poisonous place. It's a pretty dark place, and a lot of times there's a large number, a very large percentage of people who have been active have been blocked, banned. There's a whack-a-mole process where they come back as sock puppets, and you have to block them periodically. I'd say maybe half the times I've collaborated on Wikipedia, it's probably been like battled, and my favorite Wikipedia, and actually the most articulate person I've ever met, and it's only been through text, is this guy named Marcel on Wikipedia. He has this thing called the Cynics Guide to Wikipedia. I'm just going to quote a few that are more like funny or illustrative. If you hand an olive branch to a Wikipedian, he will likely try to beat you to death with it. The more a viewpoint is The most challenging, nuanced problems facing Wikipedia tend to attract the editors least capable of handling complexity or nuance. Yeah, I mean, each one of these is really good, but it's you kind of get the point. And I think it's improved somewhat. I mean, there's probably nothing in the world I've found that makes me angry as much as going to this place called Administrators Notice Board / Incidents. Like, I avoid it. These days I just like stick to these really remote articles because I can't handle, and actually the remote articles might be the most important articles because nobody wants to deal with important articles. It's only like, if you start talking about climate change or any political article or anything like that. But
so could I use this as a jumping off point, because I think this really connects back with what I was saying earlier, and I like just to try to look at this sort of thing from a broader perspective. I mean, I hear this all the time. Wikipedia has really nasty stuff going on, and it's true. But the other thing that's true is that the world has nasty stuff going on all the time. So as someone who's like organized protests that involve really contentious issues, there are people who I'm sure do not want your voice to be heard. They're like, or the people that you're associated with. What does that sound like to you? Because like to me, that sounds like the kind of conflict that exists not just on Wikipedia, but in the world we live in, right?
And can you hear me? Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, in the activist world, in seeking justice, there's many different views on how we get there. Some say burn down a building. Some say we need a revolution. Some say get on your knees and pray. Some say stay in a house and watch TV and let them do their thing. You know what I'm saying? But in the real world, we have to work through those nuances and those issues so that we can all get to that ultimate point, which is justice. And so how do we get there? We have to set aside, again, as I was saying earlier, these biases that we may carry about a particular group or individual or an organization that is involved in the movement. Because if we begin to fight among each other, we're really not accomplishing anything. And if, in other words, if those behind the scene in that dark place in Wikipedia is constantly fighting one another, the ultimate goal of getting real information out, real truth out, would be far-fetched. In other words, we'll probably never get there. So at some point, we have to, again, make some adjustments in ourselves in moving forward. And that, again, I say, entails putting those biases aside, saying the ultimate goal is truth and accuracy in this text. And how do we get there? And I think it was Eugene said, we have to trust one another. I mean, if we say anybody can come in and edit, that means you just open the doors for the world, and you're hoping that those that do edit are editing with truth in their heart.
So I think we are now running over time. I know we have both food on the way, and I know we have someone else who wants to address us from Seattle. So we have two more people who are up for questions. Brendan, are you in touch with Pine in Seattle? You think we got about like maybe a minute for each of the questions before we turn it over? Okay, so really try to keep this short. I'm sorry we don't have more time. I'd love to talk about this stuff all day.
That's fine, and I just want to make an observation that there's a problem that Wikipedia is not really dealing with adequately, and that's that there's yes, there's this systemic bias, this accidental collaborative bias, but there is also collusive bias, and it's increasing rapidly as Wikipedia becomes a more important resource. There are groups of people collaborating offline with the specific goal of the opposite of truth and justice, to warp content to suit specific agendas. And Wikipedia has to deal with this and deal with it really firmly very soon, because it's getting worse and worse. I think that I don't know what the answer is, but
any thoughts from the panel on that one? Tough problem.
Wow, I'll jump in really quick, and then that's my wife actually just going to ask this next question. But anyway, that's a hell of a point that you raised concerning that. And that exists in the real world, and it's, as I can hear and understand Wikipedia, it exists there too. And so we have some real serious issues we have to deal with in order to bring real truth and accuracy to this world, to create that beloved community. So again, it's my hope that as we have these conversations and we be unfiltered about these issues, that then and only then will you be able to eradicate those type of issues.
Okay, last question.
Yeah, first I just wanted to say that Uncle Bobby didn't say this, but in every organization, even at the movement, they have co-parental. So you must understand, and all this that I'm co-parental. Yeah. So I know in the movement, and what I'm hearing in here, I just think it's agents in Wikipedia. I mean, I think there's agents there, and it's agents in every agency that's trying to bring the world and the community together, and we have to remember that. And the only thing I want to
It's
say,
something we got, like when we have a community where I don't know an actual number, but it seems to me, and maybe there's a researcher in the room that knows better than me, it seems like maybe 70–80% of Wikipedians are anonymous, which is a deeply held value. But when that happens,
right,
it's very easy for someone to say to go in and pretend to be someone that they're not.
well, I just have an action plan because we don't like to come to these kind of meetings and then don't move out on something that's an action plan. So I was just thinking that as you all were talking, that how you could do this, because this is the young people's fight, their world. It's their future. How that you, Pete, maybe with Love Not Blood and Kim and some other people get together and see how you can have town hall meetings in the community so that you can inspire these young people, because they'll be the future people who write down here, right? And to inspire truth in them so they can move forward, and maybe Wikipedia one day can be truthful, because that's one of the biggest issues about having actual facts. And so we in our community tell our community, don't go to Wikipedia unless you have some more information that you're going to add. And so that needs to be fixed, because I'll go to Wikipedia, but you know what? When I go and read, then I go and research, because it's not trustworthy. And it has to be trustworthy because it's such an asset. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think we're going to have to move on, but I do. If any of you have something that you've been itching to say for a little while here, why don't you let me know, because I'd love to close it out with a voice other than mine.
I just want to add, like, as I said, that, for instance, as journalists, we're taking, every piece of information with a little bit of care, let's say. I think as a reader of Wikipedia, as a reader of the internet at large, we should also educate readers in the type of information they are consuming in websites that are based on crowdsourcing. And I know that Wikipedia has is full disclosure of how it's built, so people know that this could be anonymous, etc., etc. But I think educate the readers also help to kind of filter the information a little bit in what I'm making of these facts that somebody else is exposing as a reader. I think that's also helpful to build better understanding in society.
I just like to say that Wikipedia is phenomenal. And a lot of people did not believe in it in its earliest days. So if you believe in sharing, if you believe in openness, there are a lot of groups, publishers I speak to, other groups who still believe the quality cannot be on par. We know it can happen a lot. So what I'm saying is there's too much at stake for Wikipedia not to continue to excel like it has. There's been too much work that's been done. And it's phenomenal. And yet, we know the undercurrents, and a lot of it came out in the conversations today. And so I think it goes back to some of the comments from Eugene around collaboration, around trust. Fundamentally, for this community to succeed, it has to deal with these trust issues. And it's every person, including everyone who reads it, who has to figure out how to participate. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge. Maybe it's not the challenge about what kind of content happens next, because the community has built something incredible and it's phenomenal. And so if this trust issue, which reflects the world and reflects lots of challenges we know in the world, but this, beyond being a content sharer and a share of knowledge, can actually be a reflector of the greater good. And so maybe that's fundamentally what Wikipedia is about. And so I really just encourage all of us to figure out how to resolve that for the community and for the world and what you do.
If I can really quick, and it's my hope that we all join this movement within, in the social justice world, we call it a movement, right? Bringing about change. We need a movement within Wikipedia. And part of that movement, my wife just alleged to, was that we have to start with these young people, these babies, you know, and also people that look like me need to become much more involved, but they also have to know that they are welcome to become involved by being introduced to it through someone that looks like you. That becomes critical, because without us being a part of it, it can never become a beloved community.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for the general, you know, we need to focus on trust. I can't think of a better closing note. And thank you so much, Uncle Bobby, for adding some dimension to that and some specifics. Jenny, Eugene, you guys have been a phenomenal panel. I really wish we had another hour or two.